All right, hi there, AP Euro people. We've been talking a little bit about this whole idea of exploration, colonization, Europe expanding itself out from the 50s up to 1650s, and we're talking about show the impacts of this whole thing, right? How is both the New World and the Old World impacted by this European development? So we're going to focus on here to finish this little mini unit off. And one term we have to know is the idea of Columbian exchange. A lot of you guys know this already, so it's kind of a review, but it is the movement of goods, ideas, plants, animals from continent to continent. And so that's kind of a little perfect little snippet there. And think to yourself, what is truly American, right? You're thinking hamburgers, horseback riding, all that kind of stuff, right? Well, where does it originate? Think where cows come from. Or pigs, right? You gotta have that bacon, right? Pineapples and potatoes, sugar corn, all that kind of stuff, right? Where do these things originate from? Are they originally American goods or are they actually European? And that brings us the idea of the Columbian Exchange and how different goods and stuff move from place to place as the Europeans came over here. There were a lot of goods that were found in the New World that Europeans had never seen before. We're talking things like pumpkins and squash, things we have right now for the Halloween time, sweet potatoes, turkeys, peanuts, potatoes, tomatoes, all those kind of things. I mean, the biggest one here is the potato. You think about Europe, Germany, Poland, Russia, Ireland, all the potato meals that exist there. Look, that potato didn't even start in Europe, right? That started in the New World. I was one of the biggest ones coming from Old World to New World to Old World is the tobacco, which obviously used for smoking, that kind of stuff. Cocoa, used for chocolate, vanilla, same thing. All these things moving from the Americas over to the Old World, Europe and Africa. At the same time, these are all things that come from the Old World to the New World. Things like citrus fruit. Think about all the citrus fruit grown in and bananas grown in Latin America. They didn't start there. Okay, sugarcane, as well, all these islands out here, didn't start there. Even the humble honeybee, something we need to live and survive. Yep, didn't start here, guys. All livestock we have, like sheep and cattle, pigs, horses, all kind of stuff, didn't start here. Um, all the grains, those kind of things too, like wheat and rice, barley, things we take for granted. Nope, didn't start either. And the biggest thing, obviously, are the diseases. Things like smallpox and flu, typhus, things that Native American people had never seen before, and decimated a lot of their culture. Here's another little look at it. You can see another good look. Some of the biggest ones that we see here in terms of where things go. Obviously, it's a really big deal, right? With transfer of goods involving three continents, all that kind of stuff. Um, and coming to look at the rest of the world here is that for Asia, right? A lot of new foods are easy to grow, lead to a bigger food source, a bigger population. So things like rice, those kind of things are getting brought over, are getting taken over to Asia. So things like tomatoes and potatoes, peppers, those kind of things are brought there. They can be grown in Asia as more food. Africa gets two new staples. A lot of staples in African cuisine are peanuts and corn. Peanuts too, big deal over in Africa, right? And so that's actually brought over from the New World. And honestly, 1/3 of all the world crops come from America. And so you can see how big an impact that those crops had, vice versa, everywhere. Obviously, Native Americans got the short end of the stick here. I mean, we're talking a lot of mistreatment by the Spanish people. Columbus himself and his men are accused of things like murdering hundreds of thousands of people, rape and forced labor. A lot of times, Native Americans were used to mine gold. They bring a certain amount of gold dust every single day. Every 3 months, they bring a thimbleful. Otherwise, they lost their hands. Kind of a big deal, right? And so obviously, Native Americans had a lot of mistreatment by the Spanish. Also, were decimated by disease as well. Columbus did bring slaves back with him. He brought 500 Lucacanians back with him after his first voyage, and 300 lived. So, yeah, not good. Here's some etchings drawn based off the writings of Bartolome de las Casas of what happened in the New World. So these are etchings made in Europe. So you can kind of see people being burned here at the stake with your monks, those kind of things as forced conversions. This is the chopping of hands that go off here. You can see it happening. Here we see people being hanged, people being put to fires to kind of encourage them to convert possibly. All those kind of things being part of this. Some conquistadors who did come here, like I said, were really known for their harsh methods for trying to control a population. And they always brought members of the Catholic Church with them too as a way of conversion, help legitimize their exploration, their conquest, and those kind of things. We do see a cycle of conquest. We start with explorers, right? Get Columbus, They come here conquistadors, they bring missionaries with them, eventually you have permanent settlements, and eventually you end up with a colonial empire. And the Spanish did follow this whole process, right? We see very early on, 1490s, our explorers. 1500s, we have the conquistadors in the 1520s. Missionaries come with them. By the 1550s, we have permanent settlements happening in the New World. You see the influence of the Catholic Church all over Latin America, where Spain was located. You see cathedrals. The main religion in Latin America is Spanish. Is Catholicism, and so the Catholic Church did play a big role. The development of missions all over the place, to mission to the native people, developing schools, developing churches, those kind of things for those areas. Now, one big idea we have is the idea of encomienda, and this is brought up with the Spanish as a way to help control the native population. So the encomienda system was essentially the Spanish practice to make sure you get really cheap labor. Basically, it was a ripoff of feudalism, how they did things. Essentially, Native Americans were granted to become deserving subjects of the King of Spain, and so they got this subject status. But at the same time, conquistadors were given big chunks of Native American population. The Native Americans that were on it had to pay tribute, much like feudal serfs did, and render services as well. So they had to work a certain number of days on the conquistador's plantation or in the conquistador's mines, plus pay tribute or tax, and then also they had to, render those kind of personal services. You do see conquistador, like a feudal lord, was supposed to give a lot of things back, things like protection, Christian faith, defend the right to use all kind of stuff was part of it too. But they didn't really follow all the rules. That's the thing. And really, by going through a lot of work here, the system really hurt Native Americans, both through disease, overwork, those kind of things. Bad part. Really, by 1542, there are new laws that are passed, basically laws that say that the Spanish people can't have the encomienda anymore. They said they can't be slaves, and it was really supported by the guy I talk about De Los Casas in a second, but who was a big proponent, big advocate for Native American rights. But people still got around the laws because the kings in Spain and Native Americans in the New World, and so the system does die out eventually, but it still kind of exists there. We do have a colonial system that kind of a class system starts in the New World. We have peninsulares. So these are people from the peninsula, the Iberian Peninsula, right? White skin, born in Europe, right? Those people that are at the very, very top of the colonial society for New Spain. We have Creoles as well. Creoles are going to be people of Spanish origin to Spanish parents, but they're born in the New World. So even you being born in the New World puts you at a slightly lower socioeconomic status and class system than being a peninsula or being born on the European continent. Under that, you have mestizos and mulattoes. So this would essentially be mixed race. Mestizos being mixture of Spanish and Native American background. Mulatto being mixture of Spanish and African background. And then very, very bottom will be Native Americans and black slaves. And so you can see this class system develops here with the kind of this very, racially kind of divided and also kind of ethnically where you're born kind of divided system that develops in New Spain. They did use that encomienda as forced labor. They do have a Council of the Indies, so essentially a ruling council that was ruled with a viceroy for the two colonies, New Spain in the north and Peru. And there was a papal agreement about trying to get treatment for Native Americans and and how they could run things, that kind of stuff. I did mention Bartolome de las Casas before. Here's an image of him, an etching. He was a former conquistador who worked with Columbus's people, that kind of stuff, and eventually, after he went to the New World, saw what was being done to Native Americans, became a monk, and really fought for Native American rights for about 20, and it took 20 years to make his change. Didn't he all of a sudden, I'm going to help Native Americans? It took a while for him to get this idea. He does publish a book called A Short Account of the Destruction of the West Indies. I'm asking you guys to read that over the weekend. And essentially, it's an account of what happened to Native Americans at the hands of the Spanish on Columbus's islands. It was published in Spain. It did kind of push some policies to change, like the new laws, but the encomienda did still kind of exist to a degree. And really, his belief was that they've been treated harshly, and they should be educated and converted, Christianized, but not, treated as poorly. He kind of recognized that, this is a civilization, just looks a little different, is what it looks like. Like I said, disease does go to town, though, on Native Americans. So smallpox, influenza, typhus, cholera, about 9% of the Native American population is killed by disease because they lack those resistances. And the only one goes back to Europe is syphilis. And so, really, Native American population are just gone. And because of that, we do see slave trade that comes up now with Africa. The first slave ships coming to Africa, New World, around 1518 or so. And that's used basically using slaves to run the sugar mills and the mines. You have the Middle Passage, so if you remember from American history, that going across the Atlantic, sun beaten down, a large time without food or water. A lot of African slaves died on a trip across there. A lot of times Africans were traded for things like manufactured tools, good tools, guns, that kind of stuff. You know, they were basically slaves captured in war by one tribe, sold to the Europeans by another. And it's such this triangular trade we talk about of the finished goods, those kind of things like guns and that kind of stuff, rum, alcohol from Europe going down here to Africa, in West Africa, slaves going to Americas, and all the raw materials, things like sugar and tobacco, cotton going back to Europe, which you guys should know from before. Just know how much work they put in this. This is a etching of a 1600 sugar mill, and as you can tell, the work goes into it. Sugar cane is very, very tough to work with, and when you cut it, it's very, very sharp. You can slice your skin open really easily. You have to boil it down. You have to mill it here. You have to boil it down, turn to molasses. That molasses then gets turned into rum and everything else. So it's very hot work, very sticky work, very dangerous work, not very good. And a lot of times the idea of black slavery was legitimized by religion, that they were Muslim and that they were in Africa or another religion, they could do this because they weren't Christian. Where a lot of Native Americans some Native Americans did convert to Christianity. Also, ideas of disease toleration, they're used to climate and weather, those kind of things were also used to legitimize some of black labor, that kind of stuff happening in New World. Understand that in Europe, this changed everything. Okay, it's going to change the social structure, change the economics, and those are going to help kings get stronger. Okay, and for some they become greater like they were before in history, because of all this money rolling into Europe. And we'll leave you off with this idea of mercantilism. This is a big policy of international markets from the 1500s to the 1600s. Twofold thing basically. Through your colonies, the idea was to have a self-sufficient economy. You don't need to depend on anybody else anymore. Europe didn't have a lot of natural resources left. Those things weren't there. If you want to have a manufacturing industry, a finished goods industry, you have to be able to bring in raw materials. Well, guess what? You get those raw materials from your colonies. And by working with your colonies, you have a positive balance of trade. You're importing raw materials and exporting stuff out of greater value, that being your finished goods that could be as cheap as I'll get out. Also, you're also acquiring that gold and silver from bullionism. All those goods are getting traded back and forth. You're taxing. All that gold and silver coming in, you're taxing. You're bringing those kind of things in. And the idea is that it's economic warfare. You are trying to become the richest country in the world, richer than your neighbors. Now, remember we talked about big inflation before because the population increased, right? Prices went up because of that. Originally, prices started dipping. But then as we get more and more money coming in, we'll talk about this more next week, prices go up again. It's going to be a huge roller coaster of prices throughout what we're called the commercial revolution of 1500s and 1600s. One more look at this idea, right? Mercantilism, bring in gold and silver, right? We're trying to get the mother country rich, right? And make sure they have enough money. More balance of trade, right? Send out a lot more exports, make money off those things, tax the crap out of it, and then we're mother country colonies. Bring in the raw materials, send out the manufactured goods. Bring in the raw materials, out the manufactured goods, make money for the colony. And a lot of these countries, such as Spain and Britain and France, they made what we call protective politics. They basically stated that their colonies can only trade with the mother country, nobody else. So unless they're the Dutch. Dutch trade with everybody, but we'll get to that later on. That way they control the raw material supply. They always had supplies. They always had no competition. They set the price the way they wanted to, so they benefited the mother country. And that way you can make sure that you are making money, nobody else is. In England, great examples of navigation acts, which remember from U.S. history were used and then not exactly enforced very well, which led to some problems in eventual revolution in the United States. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for taking notes. And we'll talk about this on next week as we look at finish this part of the unit off and go from there. Enjoy your weekend, guys. Thank you.